Okay, welcome back to the channel. We appreciate you guys stopping by and checking us out. This is actually week 11 of week 12. After this week, we only have one more week to go, and then we are done with this 12-week cut, but it doesn't mean that we're stopping there. Okay, so yesterday we were talking about bulking and gaining weight, and I kind of did like a whole lot of information thrown out there real quick. So I'm going to revisit that a little bit more tonight in depth. But before I start in that, I just want to tell you guys this, man. I am so exhausted and fatigued right now because of my training and dieting. Whenever you get deep into a diet, when you go to cut and lose weight, like fatigue will set in. And I got to tell you, tonight was one of those nights that it was extremely hard for me mentally and physically to be in the gym to train, but I still got in there. And even though I didn't feel like being in there, my mind wasn't there, I did what I needed to do because I know come tomorrow, I'm going to be way more happy that I did it versus skipping out on it, because this is something that I want, especially when I have the energy to put forth the effort into it. So even though I'm tired, I'm still giving it all I have. For those of you going through a diet and those of you that are hungry and feeling the exhaustion and fatigue from like long-term dieting and cardio and weight training, just remember, it's going to be worth it. Even if it doesn't feel like it in this moment, just stick to your guns and continue to push through, because in the end, it's going to be worth it. Okay, so now onto the bulking. I think tonight we'll stick more to the diet side of things, and then we'll get into the training later on. So when it comes to dieting, we talked about going into a surplus, and someone left a comment on the video, and they made a very valid point. They said that they don't believe that if you're around 12 to 16% body fat, you don't need to bulk because of you're already too heavy as it is. I agree with that to an extent. So if your goal is bodybuilding and image and competitive, like in like the sport of showing yourself off for a panel of judges, going over 15% body fat, it does make it more difficult to come back down and to maintain muscle mass while going to such an extreme on the cut. So if you can stay around 15%, that's great. If you get to 18%, that's not so bad. But if your goal is to get stronger and your goal is to push as much weight as possible, or you're in a sport like you play football, or, and when I say football, I mean American NFL. I know there's other people around the world that listen to this, but let's say rugby or any type of contact sport, or wrestling. And I'm drawing a blank here. What's another sport? Help me out here.
What?
Powerlifting, strongman, any type of either contact sport or weightlifting sport that requires you to be a certain weight for a weight class, then I don't believe that there is a limit on what your body fat needs to stop at. For a health reason, sure. But for a strength reason, I don't believe so. Because if your goal is to get a stronger bench press in powerlifting, the number one thing that affects your bench press is your body weight. That is the number one thing that's going to increase the performance on your bench press is your total body weight, because the thicker your torso becomes, the less the bar has to travel before it comes into contact with your chest, giving you a smaller range of motion, which increases the total output of force. Plus, when you're in a calorie surplus, your body has ample amount of energy. So it's really, really easy to put strength on whenever you're overeating in a surplus. Now, I don't mean go ham and eat enough to gain 3 to 4 pounds a week worth of fat. But with that being said, I have done that when I used to powerlift. I was gaining about actually what I did was I figured out that I needed to gain about 15 pounds every 6 months, because I needed to gain 60 pounds over 2 years to put me in the weight class that I wanted to be in. So I had it all figured out. Now, I stuck to that for the most part for about 2 years, and I got really close. I got to 290 pounds. It was the closest I got. I fell short by about 10 pounds or so. But in the process of getting there, I actually skyrocketed my weight at the beginning, and I was gaining around 1.5 to 3 pounds per week. But I was eating 12,000 pounds. Now, eating 12,000 calories a day. Now, whenever you eat like that, it comes to a point that your body is going to plateau, even eating that many calories. I hit like 276 pounds, and my weight stalled out. I could not gain a single pound. I was eating so much food that I was on the verge of throwing up every meal, and I had to wait and stop to be able to let my food settle for a few minutes before I continued to eat my meal. Now, that's because my goal was to be as big as I could and as strong as I possibly could. So with that being said, like I don't think that there's a fat percentage you need to cut off if you're into strongman, powerlifting, or a contact sport. And then there is no weight limit except for the limit the weight class that you're in, and you want to get to the top of that weight class because it's going to be very difficult to put on that amount of muscle in that short amount of time or an X amount of time, should I say, but you can still put strength on and get stronger by being in a surplus and by putting on body mass. Don't confuse that with muscle mass, body mass. Water weight, water retention, and body fat will help your internal pressure, which will help you push heavier loads. Now, if the goal is to put on weight for bodybuilding and muscle mass, you need to take a slower approach, and then your food needs to be low gas foods, like I said, chicken, steak, lamb, even pork, rice, potatoes, sweet potatoes, low gas vegetables like bell peppers, zucchini, squash, those kind of foods. But when you're eating, you need to gear more towards whole foods that are more calorie dense, that has more protein per ounce than fat, because that's what you're going to shoot for in your protein while still getting fat in your diet without having to actually like calculate the amount of fat, because when you're eating those foods, you will get your fat in there as well.
Yeah, so like if you're looking for that surplus, like what would like a very like simple like basic sort of diet look like calorie wise? Like if you were to start out, like if you say like somebody was like cutting back or whatever, and they were doing like 2,000 calories a day, and then they want to go into surplus. So you're like, before we talked about this, you said like maybe go up about 250, 500 calories, starting out and work from there kind of thing. Like if you're doing that, like what adjustments would you kind of make? Like, would you just increase the protein itself, or like increase the carbs first? Like what would be a better option, do you think?
Okay, so if you're coming off of a cut, what I would do is, depending on how much cardio you're doing, is where I would start. I would start with the cardio. I wouldn't cut the cardio out completely. Like cardio is very beneficial to gaining weight, helping you burn up excess calories and increasing your metabolism. Plus, it keeps your heart healthy and your cardiovascular healthy, which allows you to have more endurance in the gym. So I would, if you're doing an hour of cardio, the maximum I would do is I would scale it back to about 10 minutes, 2 10-minute sessions if you're doing like the Stairmaster. And if you're walking or a recumbent bike or something, about 3 10-minute sessions a day is what I would bring the cardio back to. I wouldn't do more than 10 minutes in a session, and I would start there. Then I would see what my weight does on that. And then by doing that, you're going to actually, you can increase your sodium some, and you're going to retain more water. And then you're going to be not in a surplus, but your body is going to offset the calories that you were burning. And it's going to make your body feel like it's in a surplus because you're not going to be burning as much daily as you were. Now, let's say that you were already there and you weren't doing an excess amount of cardio. And you were, let's say, like you said, 2,000 calories a day. You're doing about maybe 1 to 3 10-minute walks a day just to kind of keep your cardiovascular up. If you're even doing cardio, we even say for some people who aren't even doing cardio, I suggest doing at least 2 minimum 10-minute walks per day. It's just good for your health and your digestion. So what I would do is, if you know what your maintenance is already, then I would go up by 250, like we said, and I would do a 50-50 split. I would increase the first time your 50% of your calories would come from carbs, and then whether it be potatoes or grits, corn, rice, or any low gas foods. And then the other 50% will come from red meats. The reason why I like to lean towards red meat is because it has more creatine in it, and you don't have to take creatine. You don't have to take those supplements. Red meat has a lot more nutrients in it than other protein sources in the terms of what you would supplement. Now, if you're like on a vegan diet or a vegetarian diet or a low meat diet, taking creatine is beneficial. If you're on a high red meat diet, you don't need to take creatine. You're getting plenty of it. So that's what I would increase first to get my calories up. And then I would wait about 2 to 3 weeks to see how my body adapted to that. And then I would increase, giving where my energy levels are, more than likely my carbohydrates. Because at this point, I would want more carbs than protein, because I would want more energy for the gym to push my workouts longer and harder. So I would start with the carbohydrates. And then I would probably gear my carbohydrates more in the morning and after my workout. And then the next time I increase my carbohydrates, I will try to bring up the rest of my day's total carbohydrate to kind of get it even across the board. So that's what I would do for that. And then I would continuously increase slowly over time. And then if I wasn't gaining any weight after the first 3 weeks, then I would bump up probably 300 calories to 350, because you want to see your weight moving at least half a pound a week, at least half a pound. Now, if you're doing it for 12 weeks or 16 weeks, that depends on how much weight you're going to want to gain. And again, this is for if you're trying to bodybuild and you're trying to put on muscle mass without putting on the least amount of fat. Because if you think about it, if you put on half a pound a week over 12 weeks, that's going to be 6 pounds that you gain. And if you get a net worth of 1 pound, 1.5 pounds of muscle from that 6 pounds, and you cut back 5 pounds, 4.5 pounds of fat, it doesn't sound like a lot of muscle. But if you do that 3 times a year, that's going to be 3 to 4 pounds of muscle. And I know it doesn't sound like a lot, but it really is, especially for natural lifters. That is a massive amount of muscle. And not everyone's going to grow that rate. Some people can grow faster, some people will go slower. And then also depends on your calorie intake as how you need to be training.
Yeah. And then like if you're going in that surplus of calories to help increase that for your workouts and everything, you're also going to want to like increase the output too. So like your work in the gym is going to increase too, weight wise and everything. So like it's going to be supplemental, like both ways kind of thing. So if you're increasing your food, how do you kind of determine like the offset of what you do with the gym to the food kind of thing? So what I mean is like if you're increasing your output or whatever, do you need to push the food further than the output? I would like my assumption would be. So like if you're now going to a bulk or whatever, so you're changing your workout a bit more to more weights, more reps, so you can gain more strength, more muscle, and things like that. The calories, like if you're gonna bump or whatever, like you're saying like 250, 500, somewhere around there, could it possibly at the beginning you might end up having to do like a larger bump depending on what you're doing because you increased like your load output?
Yeah, that very much so can be the case. But like I said, that's why I start with, if you're doing cardio, to drop the cardio first to let your body level out, see what it does, and then increase by 250. Because if you're not on a maintenance and you're in a deficit, by reducing the cardio should technically put you in maintenance. And then if that doesn't put you at maintenance, then by increasing by 250 for the first 2 to 3 weeks, you could kind of see what your weight's doing. And then from there, that's when you can start really making minor adjustments. And exactly what you said, like if you're increasing your food, you're going to be able to increase your output. So you can have longer workouts, harder workouts. Either you're going to increase your intensity, which is going to burn more calories. You can increase your volume, which will increase your calories. And there's different ways to measure volume. Like I'll get into the volume later on when we're talking more about about working out. But depending on how you increase your actual total output is the demand that you're going to need to increase your calories, because you want to stay in a surplus. So that's why I say, because when you increase your food, it's going to be a little bit harder to eat for some people. Some people have a big appetite and they'll still be hungry. Other people are going to have a more hard time getting the food down. So it takes about 2 to 3 weeks for you to get used to that amount of volume, and then you can increase it again. But if you're not gaining weight at least half a pound a week, then that's when you need to increase it, because your input will increase, your output will increase, and then as your output increases, your intake needs to increase, and it's a ladder. It's going to increase as you go along. So before I started cutting weight, I got up to 3,850 calories, and I wasn't gaining or losing. I was maintaining my muscle mass and my body fat at 3,850 calories, not gaining or losing. Now, if I wanted to gain weight, I would have to go up into the 4,000 calorie range. So you have to adjust it as it goes. So it's a constant changing thing. It's never going to stay the same. It'll stay the same for about maybe 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and then you're going to have to adjust. Either you're going to have to adjust your workout, or you're going to have to adjust your intake. And normally you're going to adjust your intake. And as you adjust your intake, it's going to help your workouts, which is going to help you work out harder, which is going to help you push harder, which is going to help you consume more calories, which will make you have to eat more calories to keep your surplus going. And it's going to get to the point where you're going to get tired of eating, because you're going to be eating a lot of food. And when you get to the point where you're like, I'm so sick and tired of cooking and eating food, you are now at the point where you need to be to really start making some serious results, because you have to get to that point. And I'm not saying everybody, but the majority of people, when you're eating that much food, it's going to kind of be miserable. You're going to get tired. You're going to be like, I wish I felt hunger so I actually want to eat, you know?
Yeah. And like for me, it's even been like I've never really been one to do like on a regular basis outside of like this training segment and stuff like that. And when we have worked out before, like my meals typically would come in the eat once, maybe twice a day kind of thing. So when I had to break down the meals into 6 meals, even though I was getting less calories, I was going into a deficit, but like breaking the meals down into multiple meals, like 6 to 7 meals a day kind of thing, that was difficult for me just in general for like even doing a cut. So like it took me a little bit to even get used to doing that, because at first, even though I was eating technically less food throughout the day than when I was doing my 1 or 2 meals kind of thing, it was still hard to get that hunger feeling at first. And then for me, like it would be even more difficult, I would assume, to bump the food up and go from there trying to input like intake more food through each meal. So when that time comes, it's definitely going to be a struggle for me, but it's something that I'll just kind of have to work my way through, and also finding those meals that I'm going to be able to enjoy eating still, and even in like larger quantities kind of thing. Because there's certain things, and a lot of people will go and they'll find like a diet online kind of thing or whatever it might be, and they'll print it out and they're like, okay, I got to follow this exactly. And that works for some people, but there's a lot, I wouldn't say a lot, but there's a good number of things that I'm not a fan of eating kind of. So I gotta, like, I'll give some stuff a try or whatever. And sometimes it kind of might grow on me a little bit, like sweet potatoes. I'm not a big fan of them. I've eaten them before though, in like a regular regimen. And for a little bit, it kind of grew on me. And I was like, you know what? These aren't that bad. But then after a little while, it got to that point of like I was gagging while eating them. And I was like, like, I can't do this anymore. So I got to change it up sort of thing.
Yeah, and that's the thing too. When you're gaining weight and you're eating food and it's hard to eat the amount of food, you need to stick to foods that you enjoy eating. I don't mean pizza and tacos and donuts, but you need to season your food in a way that's going to make you eat it. Now, here's another thing too. When it becomes difficult eating that many meals 6 times a day, like some people benefit on eating 3 large meals when they're trying to gain weight. Some people do 4 large meals. Some people do 5, 6, 7, 8. It depends on the individual. So you need to figure out which is easiest for you to stick to eating a larger amount of food, because it comes down to total calories and nutrients for the day. But a thing is, like I said about the cardio, morning cardio, it's shown that if you do morning cardio for about 10 minutes, 15 minutes of zone 2 cardio, it increases your appetite throughout the day, which makes it easier to eat throughout the day larger quantities of food. It picks the metabolism up or something. I'm not sure exactly why, but if you do morning cardio for about 15 minutes, even if you're in a bulk, it picks your appetite up, makes it easier. Another thing that you can do is you could get dextrose, which is just basically a sugar, and it makes your food sweeter. And you can sprinkle a little bit of dextrose on your food, which is a carbohydrate, and it's a natural sugar, and it makes your food sweet. And it'll make your mouth salivate, like it'll make your mouth produce a excess amount of saliva, making it easier to swallow your food. So if you're eating dry food, like if you're grilling chicken. And you're doing like chicken and other foods that are very dry, if you cut them or chop them up and you mix it in with some dextrose, it'll make your mouth like get wet easier, and it's easier to swallow. And my advice when you're eating a large amount of foods is try to make a food that your food like it's wet. If you're eating like chicken breast, if you cook chicken breast and then you heat it up the next day, it's going to be like rubber. But if you overcook it, if you cook chicken breast to 150, 155 degrees internal temperature Fahrenheit, 150, 155 Fahrenheit internal temperature, the next day when you heat it up, it's not going to be that dry. If you cut your chicken into smaller portions, it's not going to be dry because it cooks faster, and you could cook it to about 150, 155. Then when you heat it up in the microwave, it's going to cook it even more. And then another thing is ground chicken, ground turkey, ground beef mixed with your rice and some beef stock or chicken stock. It's a lot easier, especially if you put some dextrose on there. If you can make your foods a little more wet and moist, it makes it easier to swallow it. The smaller you can make your food and the easier you can make it swallow, the more you can get down If you're sitting there eating a pound of chicken breast and chewing and chewing and chewing and chewing and chewing and chewing, it's going to be hard to consume a lot of it. But if you take your chicken breast, now here's something that I did used to do, and a lot of people are kind of like, what? Take your chicken breast and boil it. And then when it's shredded up from boiling it, put it in a blender with some chicken stock. Blend it up in a blender to a fine blended mush. And you take that and you mix it with your rice or you mix it with your potatoes. And that way, it's just the texture of the rice or the potatoes that you're eating, and you don't spend a lot of time chewing it. The faster you can get it down, the more you can get it down, the easier you can get it down. And then plus, it's already all chopped up, so your stomach doesn't have to work on digesting a clump of chicken because it's already all pretty much broken down. It just has to digest it now with the stomach acids. Another thing to do is do not drink water with your food. I know this is very difficult to do, but if you can stop drinking fluid about 30 minutes before you eat and about an hour after you eat and none while you eat, your stomach acid becomes more concentrated. When you drink fluids before, during, and after you eat, your stomach acids become diluted. And therefore, it makes it harder for your stomach acid to digest and break down the food in your stomach. So it's like a battery acid. If you're trying to dissolve something in acid, you're not going to add a bunch of water or baking soda to it and dilute the acid. You want the acid as strong as possible to break it down as fast as possible. So that's why I drink water between my meals, not with my meals. And that's why about maybe an hour after my meal and an hour before my meal, I drink 1 to 2 bottles of water. And that's why I drink them down so fast the way that I do. I just drink them down to get the fluid in me. And then that way I know I'm hydrated. And then my next meal, there's chicken broth or beef stock or a chicken stock in my meal. So it makes it wet so I can eat it without drinking anything, which makes it more concentrated, which makes my stomach acid more potent. So it digests quicker in your stomach. And eating low gas foods will help your stomach digest those foods faster, helping you increase the amount of food you can eat and digest over time. So these are just a little tips and tricks to be able to get more food down and your sessions and stuff. So, because this is going to be the most important thing, is being able to eat enough food and get enough food down. And I do stand by like 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight. But if you're trying to gain weight, you can go down to 0.7 grams per pound of body weight. And then some people will benefit from 1.5 to 2 grams of protein, even 2.5 grams of protein per pound of body weight. I know it's like, oh, that's excessive. But if you're eating less carbs, you can afford more protein and more fat. If you're eating less protein and less fat, you can afford more carbohydrates. And you need to pay attention to the total calories in, because that's where you're going to make your most progression, is by actually monitoring the amount that you're eating by increasing calories. Now, I like to weigh all my food out, everything I weigh it out. And then that way, when I make my adjustments, I know exactly how much food I'm eating per meal. So, but I think that's going to be a good stopping point for this one. We could go further into this in another one. Is there anything else you want to add or ask, or any other?
No, sounds good for tonight.
Okay. All right. Well, hey guys, we appreciate y'all watching. We'll pick this up on another video. And if you guys liked the video, y'all made it this far, if y'all want to go ahead and leave a like, we'd appreciate it. If you haven't subscribed to the channel and you've been watching our content regularly, we would appreciate it if you would subscribe to the channel. And if you don't want to like it and you don't want to subscribe, it's as simple as don't do it. But all the same, we appreciate you watching. Until our next video.
Yep. Catch you later.